Good evening, everyone. This is Pastor Maury Shapiro, live from Miramar Beach, Florida, with another Tuesdays with Maury Bible Study. You can watch these Bible studies at any time on Facebook just by going to my site, typing in my name, and clicking there, because we've been talking about Moses' prayer for God to show him his glory. And we've talked in the last 4 weeks about this. We talked about compassion, mercy, patience, graciousness, and tonight we'll be talking about faithfulness. In Exodus 34:6, this is what God revealed to Moses, these 7 attributes. After faithfulness is truthfulness and then forgiveness. So these are tremendous characteristics of God's character. And he revealed them through his Son, Jesus Christ. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld the glory of the only begotten Son, full of grace and truth. Whenever it mentions glory, it's talking about attributes. And even where it says in Romans 3:23, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, us humans don't seem to have these attributes. But God is going to teach us how to have them. And when you think of faithfulness, it's a very powerful word for everybody to hear. It's steadfast, dedicated, dependable, and worthy of trust. And God meets all these criteria. Now, if you want God to be faithful in your life, it's important to understand he's going to be faithful to his will, his kingdom, his word, and the calling he has for you. So it's important to understand it. He's not going to be faithful to your own agenda. And in Romans 8:28 and 29, it says it pretty clearly. All things work together for the good to those that love God and are called according to his purpose. So in other words, you have to meet 2 conditions. You have to love God and be called to his purpose. Then all things work together for the good. Then he will be faithful in all those areas. And then in Romans 8:29, it says he has predestined us to be conformed into the image of his Son, Jesus Christ. And that's what he wants us to become. He wants us to be conformed into the image of his Son. And if we understand the calling he has for us and we're moving in that direction to glorify him, to do his will, his kingdom, according to his word, then he's going to be faithful to us. You know, we all love Psalm 91. And in Psalm 91, there's a lot of conditions. You know, it's promises. God has a lot of promises and conditions. It says, those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty. So it's living with God. It's being in relationship. Last week we talked about John chapter 15, abiding in Christ. As you abide in Christ, you will bear much fruit. You know, it gives you 3 promises in the gospel in John 15. But the condition is you have to abide in God. And as you abide in God, you will bear much fruit. Okay? It's because you're connected to the vine. Unconnected to the vine, you're not going to bear fruit. And it also says you'll have your prayers answered. You know, if we ask anything according to his will. But see, it's all about your relationship, keeping that relationship where you remain in it no matter what. You never leave it. And yes, we are tempted many times to leave it. And also, it says that you will be full of joy. These are the results of staying in your relationship. Now, we need to learn how to do this. Now, in Lamentations chapter 3, the prophet Jeremiah, now, he was called the weeping prophet. He had a very difficult mission. He told the king the truth, and the king would not listen. All the other prophets lied, and the king rewarded them. In fact, Jeremiah was even punished severely. He was thrown into a deep cistern, a deep pit, and suffered tremendously for speaking the truth. But this was his calling. And it says in Lamentations 3, verse 22, this is written from Jeremiah, because in the end he was greatly rewarded, but it was difficult. But he stayed and abided in the Lord. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. Now, that's a powerful testimony when you're being so persecuted. I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance. Therefore, I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who depend on him, to those who search for him. So it is good to wait quietly for salvation from the Lord. And it is good for people to submit at an early age to the yoke of his discipline. So we want to have this faithfulness. We want to have all the attributes of God, don't we? But like I said, they come from abiding in him. You cannot have them on your own. Apart from Christ, you can do nothing, the Bible continually says. So what God is dealing with is your soul. This is where the whole battle is. Jesus says, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? So your soul is your intellect, emotion, and will, and it's got to decide to obey the Spirit, not the flesh. So we learn. It's a process. We learn. Now, for instance, let's use this example. We talked about patience a few weeks ago. If you don't have any patience, you fly off the handle. Your soul has to learn, I can't do it, but Christ in me can. And so you turn to the Lord, and you get patience from the Lord to deal with things. You don't learn all these things one by one. You learn them. Once you're connected, you learn them. So anyway, when you think of God's calling on different lives in the Bible, Joseph, he spoke to in a dream when he was 17 that he would be a leader, and his family would bow down to him. And after that, everything went wrong. We know the story of Joseph pretty well. Everything went wrong. But God was still faithful. And when he was 30, it came to pass. But while he was going through it, it didn't seem like it. David was spoken to by a prophet when he was a teenager and told him he was going to be the king of Israel. It didn't happen right away. And he went through tremendous suffering. But God was faithful. He was going to protect him. You know, there's a story about a preacher that was in a plane crash in 1983. And I didn't get all the details, but 6 people lived in that plane crash. And he didn't have a scratch on him. And he said, God was faithful because he called me to be a preacher. He wasn't going to let me die in that plane crash. And obviously, he was right. So, as we look at this, we can also look at people that have experienced God's faithfulness. Now, one person that really impresses me is Ben Carson. Ben Carson, the doctor, not the politician. Ben Carson, all the odds were against him in his life. The only thing he had working for him is he had a mother that made him go to church every week. And this godly upbringing saved him. He was brought up in a ghetto. His mother was only 13 years old when she had her first child. There were 2 boys. She was illiterate. She couldn't read or write. She could not, her husband was already married, so he was forced to leave. She had to raise 2 kids by herself in a ghetto and in the worst neighborhood possible, the worst school. And like I said, everything was against her. She would work 3 jobs. And she'd come home and see her 2 sons sitting at the TV set, becoming brain dead, and she decided, I'm going to make them go to the library and read 2 books a week and give me book reports. So they did that, and it changed them. They became pretty intelligent, very intelligent. So Ben Carson felt the calling in his life to be a doctor. And that is a very difficult field to go into. But he had the intelligence. But he also, when he got into difficult times, he would call upon the Lord. He was taking chemistry and he could not. He was doing terribly. If he got a C in chemistry, he flunked out of med school. And looked like, that's